If you guys need updated pictures of my face, don't hesitate to Google Fournier.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. I do encourage you to follow me over there. And if you've got any questions about anything, the show, your basketball, fantasy basketball team, what I ate for dinner, whatever, ask me the questions over on Twitter. You can always do that. We're back with another of the team preview podcasts. A reminder that Basketball Monster, the site, is open for memberships, so check that out. If you want to have the best chance at winning your league, not only do we have the projections, but all the tools, trade analyzers, team analyzers, draft trackers, which honestly is the best thing that you can possibly use during any sort of draft. Gives you ideas of what stats are available, the scarcity of those stats, how players' value changes based on who's been drafted ahead of them. I do really encourage you to check that out. And not just because I'm working there, but it is a fantastic service, and I've been using it for well before I started working there as well. All right, the team preview podcast. Today we're going to be looking at, and I'm not saying this to try and insult the guest that's coming on, but one of the more confusing off seasons that we've ever seen, and one of the teams with the weirdest sort of direction in their front office. And of course, I can only be speaking about the Orlando Magic. So to talk about the Orlando Magic, I'm joined by Philip Rossman-Reich of Locked On Magic podcast and Orlando Magic Daily. Philip, how are you, and what's going on with this team?
I'm doing good, and I think you pretty much described what's going on with the team. Nobody really knows. It's just a lot of short-term thinking and hoping that everything comes together to create a direction rather than have a plan for one.
We're going to get right into this in this show because there is so much, and look, nobody knows the answer to these things because we haven't seen preseason yet. But we're going to speculate and give ideas of ways that it can go in both directions with what they're doing. But it really is just it must be a maddening situation as someone who covers the Magic and is a Magic fan.
Yeah, I mean, in one respect, I kind of get the idea of what they're doing and trying to just push the chips in and go for the playoffs. Talking to fans, they're ready for the playoffs. They don't want to sit through another rebuild. They don't want to sit through another lottery. They're ready to kind of go for broke and try to swing for the fences. Whether they did that or not, I think has really helped me fill some content this summer.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. You've definitely had no shortage of things to discuss, to think about, to criticize, to praise. There's lots of different things. So we're going to get right into everything Orlando Magic.
Let's get to it.
All right, the first question, and all these podcasts, everyone who's listening to these podcasts knows the format, Philip. You might not, because at the start of each show, we've got three questions that we ask our guest that comes on, and they're the three questions that myself and Kyle and Matt over at Basketball Monster have asked each other about these teams. So I'm throwing them to you. The first one of them is a question I think is very high in the minds of fantasy owners, and that is, does Frank Vogel's arrival spell the end for Nikola Vucevic?
I don't think it does right off the bat. Certainly, Nikola Vucevic has to be sort of on high alert. The Magic paid $17 million a year to bring in Bismack Biyombo, and that doesn't sound like how much you pay a backup center. Mm-hmm. But the Magic do have this weird mix of guys in their front court. Serge Ibaka and Nikola Vucevic can both step out and hit jumpers. Aaron, there's some thought of that they could have Aaron Gordon play the de facto center with Vucevic as a jump shooter and Ibaka as a jump shooter as well. So I don't think it necessarily spells the end for Nikola Vucevic, but whether Vucevic can stay on the floor or not is going to be completely dependent on whether he fits the defensive scheme that Frank Vogel has in mind. We've said in Orlando forever since we first laid eyes on Nikola Vucevic and really watched him play, he needs a shot blocking four, and there's only two of those in the league, and one of them is Serge Ibaka. So the Magic have Serge Ibaka in the lineup now, and so there are no more excuses for Nikola Vucevic. He's got to be able to produce more on the defensive end, and if he does that, he'll be able to pretty much, I think, keep the statistics that he's had on the offensive end and stay on the floor because the team will be winning. If he can't do that, then he's going to be in some trouble. He's probably going to be coming off the bench, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him moved at the deadline in February.
Yeah, I think that he has to start the season out because if they went with Biyombo as the 5, Barker as the 4, Gordon, Fournier, and Peyton, it is just an offensive.
There's no offense.
It's a team that's probably going to have a defensive rating of about 95 and an offensive rating of about 75. There's just nothing. No one can score. Now, Vucevic isn't a great shooter that's going out there and knocking down threes. Although he did hit a couple of threes, I believe, in a Eurobasket qualifier the other day. I think he hit 2 of them.
Yeah, he's supposedly taking some more threes at Eurobasket, and he said during the summer that he's working on a 3-point shot. Frank Vogel has even suggested that they may allow him to shoot 3-pointers this year if they play him at the 4, which doesn't make sense to me. But any way they can spread the floor, they've got to try and do it because they just don't have a lot of shooting in that starting lineup.
I think regardless of what happens in terms of how they try out a starting 5, Vucevic has to lose a couple of minutes because, as you said, you don't pay that sort of big bucks to Bismack Biyombo, which is something, again, I was not behind at all. I don't think Biyombo is worth that as a player. But you don't pay that sort of money to get a guy to come and play 18 minutes a night. So Biyombo is going to play 20-plus minutes, 22, 23, 24 minutes. They're not going to be able to really play together maybe for a couple of minutes, and that's going to mean that Vucevic is not going to play 31 minutes. He's going to be down in the 28, 29 range. Do you think that's accurate?
That sounds about right. I would probably still edge that Vucevic will be somewhere around 30. I haven't done the math, but I think you're right. It's going to be very tough to parcel out the minutes because you not only have to deal with Vucevic Biyombo, but I mean, I'm someone who thinks Ibaka should probably be playing a center, and I want to see some lineups where Gordon and Ibaka are playing together, and so that takes both Vucevic and Biyombo off the floor at the same time. And so how Frank Vogel susses out this front court is going to be one of the more interesting questions that we begin to see as the season starts.
Well, that situation you mentioned with Ibaka, I think is a tremendous thing that they should definitely look to do. And you talked about shot blocking 4s before, how there's not many in the league. I think that they had a guy that potentially could have turned into a player like that, not to the same level as Ibaka, but Aaron Gordon could have been that guy that turned into a shot blocking 4. But now he's not going to be playing the 4 for big chunks of time during the game. In terms of Vucevic for fantasy, he was a real solid top 30 player. You're not going to have to take him there anymore, and you shouldn't take him there just because there is that significant risk associated with it, because we don't know what Vogel's going to do. We know that he preaches defense. We know that he's not enamored by Vucevic at this early stage because they wouldn't have gone out and signed Biyombo, and Vogel would have come out because there's been plenty of questions and said, you know what, Nick is going to be our starter. He's still our guy. Biyombo is insurance, whatever. But he hasn't said any of that sort of stuff. So you know that there's doubt in his mind. But that drops Vucevic down outside the top 50, maybe into the 60s or 70s. And last season, the few games that he played off the bench, Philip, he still, even in like 26 minutes, he still was able to go and get 20 points and grab 10 rebounds in those limited minutes, destroying second units.
Yeah, he has, and that's something that we've thought about a little bit too, especially since at that time the Magic had a guy like Dwayne Dedmon who was a defense first guy and really helped the Magic. And Vucevic, you don't need to rely so much on his defense against second units. His offense becomes that much more valuable. I think in the long run on a good team, Vucevic is probably kind of your sixth man off the bench, he sort of like an Enes Kanter almost is kind of the role that I would describe as kind of the ideal fit for Nikola Vucevic in the long run. So he's going to still be able to produce. I think he'll still put up offensive numbers. The question is, with this Magic team so focused on the playoffs, I think they really believe defense is their ticket in. And so if you're not going to play, this team's going to be very weird fantasy-wise, I think, because if you're not going to play defense, which isn't something that fantasy stats really track, it's going to be harder and harder to find minutes and find a justification to play them with the Magic kind of in this short-term frame of mind of we've got to make the playoffs in 2017.
Vucevic he's not a great defender, but he's not a terrible defender. He's not an Enes Kanter level of defender, but even
no, he isn't that bad.
Even Kanter's a little bit. The badness of his defense is a little bit overstated. Vucevic can block some shots. He actually saw his defense, I think, improve significantly, and that's probably one of the. If I had to list things that Scott Skiles did positively last year, that would probably be the one and only thing, is that Vucevic's defense actually improved and his shot blocking ability improved last season. And he had some games, I can't remember if it was early or late, where he'd block like 5 shots in a row and then he blocked like 4 the next game. And he had these big bushels of blocks in the plenty of games last season. So that was an encouraging sign.
Yeah, and his defense has gotten better. I kind of, it feels like I'm always trashing Vucevic for his defense, but his defense has progressively gotten better. I think 2 years ago, he gave up 54% shooting at the rim. Last year, it was down to 52, but 52 is still not a good number. And I think where a lot of the problems are, we're not necessarily taught. He's improved his ability to block shots, and that certainly helps fantasy owners. But when you're looking at this team where he's continued to struggle is on pick and rolls. He's not someone that's going to stop people from getting into the paint. And ultimately, when you're evaluating this Magic team, they're focused purely on defense. And so if he can't shore those areas up and prove that he can at least be an even defender, then he's going to see his minutes decrease or have his minutes drop in some way, or who he plays against change. Maybe coming off the bench is the best thing for him statistics wise, where you keep his offensive production and you don't worry so much about his defense. And so, Vucevic is just a very, very hard guy to figure out, even though he has gradually improved in the last 4 years. You just wonder when is he going to hit that peak, and is that peak enough for a team to win with?
In ESPN's real plus minus statistic, defensive real plus minus statistic last year, there were 70 centers in that list. He came in at 45th. So he's not in the top half, but he's better than guys. He came in better rated than Jonas Valanciunas, Boban Marjanovic. He was rated higher than Greg Monroe, Karl Anthony Towns.
Everyone's higher. Everyone's rated higher than Greg Monroe,
yeah, except for Julie Okafor. Karl Anthony Towns is another one who was below him. Tim Mozgov, Miles Plumlee, Willie Cauley-Stein. And the last two were Okafor and Kanter. So he definitely is not great, but he's still ahead of some guys that you might not expect him to necessarily be ahead of. Bebe Nogueira was there as well, but still in the middle of the pack, which is okay. And as I mentioned, that in a bench role, he can still put up numbers. So I've drafted him in the draft the other day, I think at about pick 60 or so, because I'm going to get really good percentages. I'm going to get solid scoring and rebounding. And if he does he might go and play 22 minutes and just completely stuff everything up that I think he's going to do. I can't see that this team has any other offensive options that they're going to allow him to do that, because they might stop teams, but they just won't be able to put it in the hoop whatsoever, and they'll be trying so hard on offense that it might actually impact their defensive performance as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get it. I mean, and I think that's kind of the theme of this whole Magic team. I'm sure we'll get to it in some of these other questions that you've got coming up in the show. The whole theme of this Magic team is we just don't know how the pieces are going to fit together. I mean, Vucevic could come out, Ibaka could solve all his defensive problems, and he's back up to averaging, because there's no other real offensive options. He's averaging 23, 24, 25 points per game. Maybe his rebounding goes down again. He's getting like 8-9 rebounds per game, and he's able to block shots because he has the comfort and the ability to recover that he hasn't had before, because he knows he's got help on the backside. Maybe bringing in a guy like Ibaka, even if he plays with Biyombo, maybe that unlocks him and frees him up defensively and makes him even better and makes him more valuable on the court. We really just don't know. It could go. I mean, I could see either thing happening with Vucevic.
Yeah, that's definitely, and you'll see it when you look at our projections of Basketball Monster. I've got a little bomb icon next to his name, which indicates it is a risky play, because we just don't know which way it's going to go. Now, let's not focus too much more on Nick Vucevic, because we've talked about him plenty. Let's talk about the next question, and that is Lord Alfred Payton. Do you think that he has a potential to turn into a top 15 point guard, or is he destined to become a Michael Carter-Williams-y type player, a guy who can't shoot, distributes the ball, and does those sort of things, rebounds, plays defense, but just can't get his offense up to that level that enables him to be an upper-tier point guard?
I think he can get into that conversation at least. I don't think he'll fall as far back as Michael Carter-Williams. As much as Elfrid Payton struggled last year, and he certainly struggled, his scoring went up, his shooting went up, his assists stayed pretty level. He didn't have a significant reduction in turnovers, but overall, Payton, for all the struggles that we perceived that he had, played decently, at least offensively, at least numbers wise. Certainly he didn't get along with the head coach, with Scott Skiles, and that's a huge thing. And that's a big reason why I think his play dipped the way it did, especially in January and February. I think it really felt like he was still nursing a shin injury that he suffered in December for much of the season. But at the end of the year, he started looking like the Elfrid Payton that we saw his rookie year. And I think it's very possible that he continues his offensive improvement and gets back to kind of the level of play that he was at his rookie year, where he really looks like he can be a starting point guard in this league. Is he ever going to crack the top 10 and be a guy like some of those all-star players? Probably not. But if he can get to, where Rajon Rondo was when he was with the Celtics, or get, maybe not that high, obviously, because Rondo is just an assist fiend, but if he can get, that's the player that's most comparable to him. But I think he can get kind of to a Rondo light level and be in that conversation to be in the top half of point guards in the league.
Obviously, the concern with Peyton is, from a fantasy point of view, is his free throw percentage, which is it's not a situation where you have to punt that category if you draft him, but you have to have an extraordinarily strong base to be able to absorb him. But in a situation where you've drafted, say, Drummond or Jordan, and you're in a punt free throw mode, and generally those sort of teams do lack assists, you're grabbing Peyton at the end of a draft, even if it's at pick 80 or pick 90. He's I think his rank is currently outside that range, but you grab him there because you're going to get a guy that's probably going to get you 7 assists, potentially goes up to 8, and can get you 2 steals a game, and can get you 5 rebounds, and he might hit you half a 3 a game, and it might even go up because, as you said, his shooting improved, his field goal percentage went up, his ability to hit some shots actually improved, which is huge for him in terms of what he does offensively. As his ADP on Yahoo is 107, so you can get that guy late. We saw in his rookie season in that stretch in March, he was a top 50 player, even with that poor free throw percentage. So we know he can do it. And the Skiles factor is significant to me because if there's one coach that's not named Byron Scott that can ruin a player's confidence, it's Scott Skiles. And he killed Peyton last season. The front office, obviously, it was basically, it's going to be Skiles or it's going to be Peyton. And it ends up Peyton. So the front office likes him. Vogel must be on board with that because that's obviously the reason that they got rid of Skiles, or Skiles resigned, is because of Peyton, and that had to have been brought up with Vogel. So look, we really believe in Alfred. Do you? And you'd have to think that he'd have some sort of positive thought process on him, especially given the way that Peyton can play defensively. So he's a real chance to take a step forward, and don't be too scared off by what the Skiles induced malaise was from last season. I think that. Do you think that's all accurate?
I think that's very accurate. I think just the interpersonal relationship between Peyton and Skiles wasn't good. I mean, I know one of my writers was commenting to me whenever we'd hear a Scott Skiles press conference, it just felt like he was doing all these kind of like subtle passive aggressive digs at his point guard, it just wasn't a good relationship between point guard and coach. It was pretty not clear to see, but there were definitely signs that there was something wrong, even if it was going unsaid. The only caution I might give on this front is his rookie year. I think Peyton was put on the ball a lot more and running a lot more pick and rolls in the Jacques Vaughn, James Borrego offense. Skiles ran a much more motion offense, and I think Peyton really struggled with that because it took him off the ball. It was very much a pass around the perimeter offense. We have no clue what kind of offense Frank Vogel is going to run. It's got to be different than the one he had in Indiana because they don't have Paul George, obviously. I don't know if we'll see pick and rolls a lot. I don't know if we'll see Peyton on the ball as much. That's going to be a big determining factor on whether Peyton can be successful offensively because obviously you move him off the ball, his shooting becomes an issue. Having said all that, Frank Vogel told the local media here in Orlando that he wants Peyton to shoot. He wants to have the confidence in Peyton to shoot the ball, and if he doesn't shoot, he's going to take him out. And so it seems like the opportunity is going to be there for Peyton to develop that shot or at least gain confidence in that shot or have someone be confident in a shot. And so maybe he knows something we don't, and we'll find out in October.
Last season after the All-Star break, he also averaged 7.5 assists a game, and that was in that time frame when Victor Oladipo was going crazy as well. So he only averaged 6.3 for the season, but that means it's because he had such a terrible start to the year. So he did start to really get it together towards the end, and there's upside to go 8+ assists this season. Now, you mentioned Paul George, so that segues me nicely into the next question, because the next question is about the player that Frank Vogel thinks can play the Paul George role, and that's Aaron Gordon. Is he a guy that you think can play well enough at the small forward minute to ensure that he's getting at least 30 minutes a night? Because we know the front court's crowded. Is he a 30-minute a night player? I think yes. What do you think?
I don't know if the Magic really have a choice.
Yeah,
I mean,
if
you're not gonna play him, certainly he'll see an uptick in minutes. But if you're not gonna play him somewhere near 30 minutes per game, who are you gonna play? Are you gonna throw Jeff Green in there? I mean, everyone knows what Jeff Green is, and it's not particularly good. Are you ready to make Mario Hezonja your small forward? Are you gonna do Hezonja Fournier lineups? Especially early in the year, the Magic are banking a lot on Aaron Gordon. I think we've seen Gordon improve dramatically in a short amount of time and then get hurt, and that kind of stops everything. He's been healthy all summer, and so I think there's certainly some anticipation to see what Gordon can do. And Gordon has always said, "I'm more comfortable at the small forward position," so this will be his chance to prove it. the Magic have invested a lot in Aaron Gordon. They took him with the 4th pick in the draft 2 years ago. They haven't really had a chance to unleash him yet. I think they really believe that he's their guy. Essentially, I mean, as good as I think they think Evan Fournier is, as much as I think they're going to put more in Serge Ibaka and Nikola Vucevic. I think they're expecting some nights where Aaron Gordon is going to be their guy, and they're going to rely on him to lead the team. I think they're kind of banking on him having a big breakout year this year, and so I certainly see him playing up near 30 minutes. It may take some time for him to ramp up to that level, but the way this roster is constructed, there's going to be a lot of depth, and I think their finishing lineup's going to be different every night anyway. But I would suspect that they anticipate Gordon playing those heavy minutes and taking that big step up and taking a big leap in his career this season.
I think Gordon's going to be a monster this season for a lot of those reasons that you mentioned. Now, he played 28 minutes a game after the All-Star break last season. He was sort of in and out of starting lineups and playing. It was 28 minutes.
He had to gain trust.
But it wasn't 28 minutes every game. Like, he'd play big minutes and he'd play 22 minutes, and it'd go up and down. But yeah, I think that he's going to have a monster year. But what will happen to me is him playing the 3 more. It might drop his rebounding rate a little bit, and I think it will drop his block rate a little bit, especially if he's playing with Ibaka at the 4. Now, if Gordon goes to the 4 and Ibaka goes to the 5, and they play that lineup a lot, which I think it's something they should really look into, but it's hard with Vucevic and Biyombo both there. That means that he's a chance to be a 1-1 player, a guy that hits a 3, gets a steal, gets a block a game, and potentially gives you 1.5 blocks. Now, he can get a lot of steals as well. He's a guy that gets a lot of rebounds. I think his scoring is going to take a step up. And if Vogel truly believes that he can fill that Paul George role, I think you're going to see his passing develop as well. And if Vogel thinks he's got the ability to be that sort of passer, 3-4 assists is not a crazy expectation for him. And he could be a guy that goes 15, 8, and 4 with a steal and a block and a half and a 3, and that's top 50 sort of numbers. I'm not at all suggesting that he needs to be drafted in the top 50, but I will be stunned if Aaron Gordon is not a top 80 player this season and probably a top 70 player. I think that there's a huge amount of upside. He's heading into his 3rd year. This is when players take the step forward. You mentioned the injury last year. He didn't have a full training camp because he had a broken jaw. He's had injury issues in his rookie season with the foot. He's ready to go. Everything's ready to go. Everything's lining up for him. Yes, he's playing out of position, but I think they're going to find some minutes for him at the 4. And I think that obviously Vogel and the organizations trust him. Well, they gave away Tobias Harris for nothing so they could give Gordon a bigger role. So the trust is there in him, and I'm really, really confident in him being able to do it. And that's big for me because I did not like the Gordon pick when they made it. I was very down on him throughout his rookie season, but I've completely turned around.
Yeah, and certainly a lot of people questioned that pick, especially since, essentially he was the big pick for the Magic in this rebuild. I mean, they tanked 2 years essentially to get into that Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker draft. It turned into a 3-person draft with Joel Embiid, and they ended up with 4. So, not to put any more pressure on Aaron Gordon, but that pick was pretty central to what the Magic were trying to build in the last 5 years. I would definitely take a look at his steal rate. I wouldn't be surprised if his steals go up this year. I think he's going to be kind of playing free safety on the perimeter, like how Vogel's used Paul George in the past. And so it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. Gordon said, I'm ready to do everything for this team, and he certainly has the talent, I think, to, like you said, bump his assists up. If the Magic are truly going to play fast, which is something Skyle said they were going to do, but they never really did. If they're truly going to begin playing at a much faster pace, getting out in transition, Gordon's the kind of guy that not only finishes shots at the rim, but he's pretty good in open space and distributing the ball as well. And so it wouldn't surprise me if that leads to a general increase in all of his statistics. I mean, certainly more minutes will do that too.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what he's going to do this season. There's a lot to like about what he does from his game, and from a fantasy point of view, it's tremendous. Now, in the draft, the Magic had the 11th pick. Philip, that's gone. It was Domantas Sabonis. It's headed off to the Thunder. I already spoke with Fred Katz about that pick. We don't need to dwell on that trade. Actually, let's talk about it just quickly.
Okay.
Let's talk about the trade. Did you approve of the trade? Were you disappointed with the trade?
Well, I thought that it's really funny how I think about this trade. I do think that trading Victor Oladipo was probably the right move, because having watched him for the last 3 years, it didn't look like he was ready to take the next step as a player. He wasn't. We went into last season. I'm sure I talked with you last year on the preview podcast that we needed to see Victor Oladipo become an all-star and take that next step as a player. And this past season, he really didn't. He kind of had the same season he had the year before. He was pretty good, started playing it at all-star level when the game stopped mattering, when they were out of the playoff hunt, and was just kind of generally inconsistent offensively. The Magic, I think, just kind of decided we're not waiting anymore. We can't afford to wait anymore. We like Evan Fournier. We can't spend money on everybody. We need to begin taking some risks and taking a step forward. And they went out and got a player who has an elite skill at something. Serge Ibaka is an elite rim protector and an elite defender. So they traded someone who's a bit of an unknown for someone who's more of a known commodity. Now, granted, Ibaka's also a free agent and is going to cost a lot of money, but I think they at least said, we're beginning to force an identity on this team that didn't quite work out under Scott Skiles, that they expected to work out, but it just didn't work out. Now, having seen the Bismack Biyombo deal come through, like, as when they got Ibaka, I was like, okay, they're either going to go Ibaka Vucevic, and that can work, or my dream was, I was telling everyone, oh, they're going Ibaka Gordon, Vucevic is going to get traded for something, and that's how they're going to build. I was really surprised by the Biyombo signing for that reason, and I think that the Magic made a bad deal. If Biyombo was truly their top target all along, and they were going to get him in free agency, trading this team really needs a guy like Victor Oladipo who can create a little bit for himself off the dribble. They really lack that offensive weapon right now. And as imperfect as Oladipo is, and as much as I don't think he's worth a max contract in free agency, which I'm sure he'll get because it's the NBA, if their goal is to make the playoffs immediately, this team probably needs a guy like Victor Oladipo more than they need a guy like Serge Ibaka with Bismack Biyombo in the fold. So in that sense, I'm a little more lukewarm on the deal now than I was on draft night. On draft night, I liked it. I was like, okay, I see where they're going. This makes some sense. I can justify this deal. It's a risk, but it's a good risk. Now it's like, well, now they're missing a piece, and they probably, honestly, I honestly think with this team, they really could use a guy like Tobias Harris more than a guy like Victor Oladipo. And so I just feel like they're missing a piece, and they had it, and they let it go.
Let's talk draft night now then.
Okay.
The only pick that they actually had was in the second round, and it was well, actually that's not true. They had two in the second round, but they traded one to Portland. That was Jake Layman.
They traded one to Portland, yeah.
Steven Zimmerman is the guy that they picked with the 41st pick. A big man out of UNLV. He's a decent scorer. Needs a little bit of work on his defense and his shoot. Like, he's a guy that potentially can stretch, but hasn't been able to do that yet. He's not really going to be able to see the court much at all this season, is he?
No, he's a major work in progress. He's still kind of skinny. He's got to put on a lot of weight to bang around with other centers. I actually, his defense certainly needs a little work, but he's got good recovery and good shot blocking instinct. So I think that is something that they like in him. He's definitely got some spring in his step, and offensively he's a lot more advanced than you think, but he's got to add some strength. He's going to get pushed around a lot in the NBA when he does play. It wouldn't surprise me to see them send him to Erie for some stretches. They'll probably want to keep him close and in their weight room so they can monitor some things, but I wouldn't expect a lot out of Steven Zimmerman his rookie year, and they'll kind of develop him and see where he's at heading into his second year.
The Magic have only got 14 guys under contract at the moment, and two of those are Zimmerman and Damian Rudesh. So they've got, if they send him away to the D-League, their depth is really, really thin at this point. Is that something that you think that they continue to do in the offseason, or are they going to bring some other guys in? Because there's been no talk of movement of them bringing anyone in, because they don't even, like I said, they don't even have the minimum guys or the maximum guys on the roster. They've only got 14 guys, and one of those is Rudesh, who really is a terrible NBA player.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Today, the Magic announced that they signed 6 guys, including Damo Rudesh. So they added some guys off their summer league team. So Kevin, just to complete their training camp roster, they added Arinze Onuaku, Kevin Murphy, Damo Rudesh. I'm trying to remember all the names. Cliff Alexander and Nick Johnson from Arizona, or formerly from Arizona.
Nick Johnson.
Yeah. I think a lot of those guys are destined for the D-League. The Magic tend to like to carry only 14 players. They like keeping that extra roster spot open for whatever reason, whether it's to absorb an extra guy in a trade if they need to, or just in case they want to call someone up from the D-League.
Just in case they want to trade a young player on a really cheap contract for Ersan Ilyasova and Brandon Jennings again.
Exactly. Exactly. Something like that. it wouldn't surprise me if they go into the season with only 14 players. They obviously added 19. They've got 19 now, I think, on their roster for training camp. A bunch of those guys are going to end up in Erie with the Bayhawks and their D League team. One or two of them may make their way up to the main roster if they need someone. That's what happened with Keith Appling last year. But otherwise, I think this general roster that they have is the one that they're going to really be relying on heading into the season. A roster of 14 guys with probably 10, 11 guys they feel really comfortable with.
Let's talk Serge Ibaka now, because he's obviously the big name on this team now. He had a really, really down season last year in Oklahoma City. There's been lots of talk about Ibaka potentially not being quite as young as what he makes out he is. Those birth certificate issues that come with some players with African heritage. And look, in his statistical profile, sort of leans to that he is a little bit older, because he's seen his block rate. In 2011-12, he blocked 3.7 shots a game. Last year he was at 1.9. Like, we're talking divided by 2. He's basically blocking half the amount of shots. His field goal percentage from that year dropped from 54 down to 48. He's just not as active. He only grabbed 6.8 rebounds per game last season, which again is basically a career low for him. His scoring was the lowest he's had in 4 seasons. He's shooting his threes, but he only hit them at 33% last year and didn't even hit a 3 a game. Why do you have confidence that he will bounce back, or maybe you don't have confidence?
I have confidence he'll bounce back because I think the Magic are going to put him closer to the basket. If you start him with Nikola Vucevic, you're going to be able to run some lineups. You're going to be able to run plays where Ibaka is setting up on the block and Vucevic is out on the perimeter. I don't think you could do that confidently with Steven Adams. And Steven Adams really emerged as the Thunder's primary kind of defensive center, and especially with the way the NBA is now, as a 4 in on both offense and defense, you're going away from the basket. And I think Vogel is shown that he's committed to and can run an offense with two traditional bigs successfully in today's NBA. So I think you're going to see Serge Ibaka get closer to the basket. A lot of his field goal percentage decrease, I think, is a fact of him just shooting jumpers a lot more. He wasn't around the basket as much as he used to be. And so I think the Magic are going to use him that way. His usage rate, surprisingly, has never been more than 20%. I think essentially meaning if everyone gets equal amount of possessions, they should all use 20% of the possessions. Serge Ibaka has never been that. He's always been a below average guy. And so on that front, at least, the Thunder just never really used him. I think the Magic are going to use him a lot more. I think they're going to run plays for him and give him more opportunity. And whether he wants to admit it or not, I think Ibaka was a little bit unhappy that he was not involved in the offense. And whether we, like to think of it or not, guys have egos. And I think that began to affect his defensive play some and affect some other things. The part that still concerns me about the way the Magic are built and why I think Ibaka is better as a 5 is for all those reasons. If you play Ibaka at the 5, he's closer to the basket. He's camped in the paint defensively. The thing that concerns me on the rebound front, on the block front, and even on the defensive front is so many more teams use stretch 4s now. Ibaka is going to be out on the perimeter rather than in the paint, kind of helping on pick and rolls and helping protect Vucevic a little bit when he's involved in pick and rolls. I'm concerned about him getting from the 3-point line to the paint to clean up mistakes as much as he used to during his heyday. But I'm confident, though, that if you use Ibaka a little bit more offensively, whether that means he'll be as efficient or as effective, I think that will get him in a better frame of mind, and we'll see his stats kind of begin to tick up a little bit. I don't think they'll ever get to the height that they were, when they made their finals run, especially. But we saw in the playoffs what an engaged Serge Ibaka can do on the defensive end. He can still be a really, really effective player.
You mentioned about his shooting, about his field goal percentage dropping because he's heading out to the 3-point line. I think that it might go up, but he's also, because of the lack of offense on this team, he's going to still have to camp out there a little bit as well, because that projected starting 5, there's one guy who's a 3-point shooter, and that's Fournier. Gordon's a below average 3-point shooter. Payton is terrible. Vucevic, maybe, but he's not going to be an above average 3-point shooter. So he's going to have to spend that time out there anyway, shooting those threes, because he's the only one who's really shown anything in terms of being able to hit them at an above average rate, and he was below average last season, but he can still get to that. Now, in saying that, I think that he does take a step forward, but a lot of people are out there thinking that he's going to be looking back to be a top 20 fantasy guy again. I cannot see that happening. I think he maybe sneaks inside the top 50. I think his blocks go back up. His scoring definitely goes up with that usage thing that you mentioned earlier. He gets a little bit more usage. I think his threes maybe go up a bit. And the confidence in terms of the defensive stuff, we heard Dwight Howard admit it last season. He was not engaged defensively because he got ignored on offense. And he came out and said, look, you know, I couldn't get myself motivated on defense because I was frozen out of everything offensively. Now, Ibaka's not purposely frozen out, but when Westbrook's using 30% of possessions and Durant's using 30% of possessions, he's just not touching the ball, and it has to seep into what he does. Now, some players are able to just not care about that, but not every player is able to do that. And Ibaka looks like he fits into that sort of role, just given the way that as his offensive touches drop, his defensive performance drops as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can bounce back, whether it was just a case of situation and environment, or it is in fact that he's 3 years older than he's listed, and his athletic decline has well and truly set in. We don't know that yet. I think if you're looking at him to be a top 20 guy, I reckon you'll be disappointed. But if you think he's going to be a guy that's around 75 like last season, I don't think that'll be the case either. He probably pushes himself to around that 50 mark with an increase in scoring, blocks, rebounding, and hopefully his three-point output as well. So there's a lot of things to sort of be excited about, but with a little bit of tempering on terms of his production. Now, free agency, we've touched on Bismack Biyombo already. I don't think Bismack Biyombo is that good. I think if you're starting Bismack Biyombo as a center and playing him 30 minutes a night, you're not going to be a great team, because we can talk about players being poor defensively, like Enes Kanter, and we said that's going to limit his playing time. He can only play 24 minutes a night because he gets roasted on the other end. He can't do anything defensively. Well, I'll throw it the other way and say that's fine, but you put Bismack Biyombo out there, and he is literally zero. Even if you leave him alone for dump-offs, he can't catch the ball. He gets ignored on offense. It's basically 4-on-5 on that end of the court. So he is a liability there. So if he's playing 30 minutes a night, your offense is really going to struggle. So people who think, oh, they paid him this money, he's going to come in, he's going to start, he's going to play 30 minutes, I want him on my fantasy team, I just want you to just calm down a little bit, because, yeah, even if he plays 30 minutes, what's he going to give you? 8 points? He might give you 10 rebounds and 2 blocks, but he won't impact your field goal percentage because he doesn't take any shots. He's a poor free throw shooter. He gets no assists. He gets no steals. He doesn't hit threes. He doesn't get points. He's a very limited fantasy player. And in terms of real life, I think if you're relying on Biyombo to put up and be a starting caliber center on a, say, top 4 seeded team, I just don't see it working out. Can you see any room for growth in him offensively, or do you just think that his defense is just that good?
I mean, I think the Magic gave him a $17 million contract based on what he did in the Miami and Cleveland series. I mean, I think there's no doubt about that. And it's a common NBA trope. It's the Jerome James syndrome. Recency bias. The playoffs blind us to everything. I mean, we talk better about Enes Kanter now with the Oklahoma City Thunder than we did when he was with the Utah Jazz. I mean, I think your value is definitely tied to how good your team does. And Biyombo certainly, he certainly played really well in that playoff series, and so it's certainly in there. But I agree with you. Biyombo gives you virtually nothing on offense. I think that you're going to be, you've got to have the right team around him if he's going to be your starter. Coming off the bench, I mean, obviously, salary aside, he's still probably a reserve center. Give him some minutes. Give him a spot start here or there. When your center goes down, he's going to block shots. He's going to keep the defensive intensity up. He's going to make it hard for for the other team defensively. You've just got to be able to work around his offensive limitations, however they show up, whether it's involving him pick and rolls or just kind of leaving him on the opposite block for dump downs and hope that he catches the ball, or the defense has to recognize him and collapse in. But like you said, he's kind of like a in real life player. He doesn't really give you much in terms of fantasy value. Like you said, he's not going to shoot very much. His rebounding, if he gets more minutes, his rebounding could creep up near 10 a game. I mean, in 22 minutes per game last year, he averaged 8 rebounds per game. But his fouling is still an issue, so you don't know how many minutes you can actually play him. He did a good job in the playoffs, but we just don't know what the consistency is with him yet. And honestly, I have no clue what to expect from him other than maybe at one point pushing Vucevic out of the starting lineup because the Magic are just so desperate for defense at all times.
His usage rate, the highest in his career, has been 13%. So it's extraordinarily low. He was below 12 last season. And you mentioned he did have a good stretch against Miami. And he had, but a lot of that and a lot of public perception is based on the fact that he blocked LeBron James at the rim. Oh, Biyombo, he blocked him at the rim. And if the Orlando Magic look at it and sign him based on that, it's ludicrous. Because when Valanciunas came back, it wasn't that he played so well that we've got to keep Biyombo out there. He went back and played 17 minutes a night with a guy that was hobbled on one ankle, who Dwayne Casey doesn't love and plays only 26 minutes a night. Biyombo, despite getting 20 rebounds in one of those games, and despite being a defensive presence, with a guy hobbled on one ankle, came back and they said, "Sorry, Bismack, you're going to have to go back and play 17 minutes in a do or die type of situation." So the Raptors didn't place that much faith in him, and people who just think 17 million, starter, 30 minutes, let's go. He's just not that player to me, and I just don't ever see it happening. And I'm not trying to just bash everything what the Magic did here, because it's fine to have hope with things. I just want to provide a perspective of what this guy actually can be and what he's shown to be so far. And we talk about guys like Serge Ibaka that might be older than they are. Bismack's another guy that potentially might be there. He's 23 allegedly, but we don't know.
Kyle Lowry wished him a happy 40th birthday the other day.
He sure did, and he's probably I was gonna say he's probably closer to 40 than 23, but that's maybe a little bit harsh. But 23 is probably pushing it a little bit. But he is an impactful player defensively, no doubt. He puts up big numbers there. But if you look at just say an offensive box score plus minus and defensive box score plus minus, he was a massive 2.3 in defensive last season, but his offense was worse. So every year,
he was a negative player.
Last 3 years, he's had defensive box score plus minus. If you don't know this metric, if you go over 2, it's really impressive. He was 2.2, 2.8, 2.3, but he was a negative total guy in each of those seasons because his offense was negative 4.7, negative 3.2, negative 2.4. So he's never been a positive player based on any of those metrics. So that's a real concern as well. And I think that from a fantasy point of view, you need to be aware. Now, that might be a situation that allows Vucevic to get back to playing 30 minutes a game because he just cannot do it, Biyombo. But don't get excited about him thinking that he's going to go out there 30 minutes, 12 and 12 and 12 and 2.5 blocks, because it's just, he might get 12 rebounds and he might get 6 points. And that's probably what he's most likely to do. The other guys they brought in, I really want to avoid talking about Jeff Green because it is one of the strangest situations in the entire off season. But we have to talk about it. He signed a 1 year, $15 million.
Let's talk about it.
1 year, $15 million contract. His position is that of where Serge Ibaka plays and where Aaron Gordon plays. So he's either not going to play, which is fine because at this point we understand that Jeff Green's not a good NBA player, but the other thing is he takes minutes away from Gordon at the 4, or he takes minutes away from Gordon at the 3. I cannot understand the rationale behind it. Surely he's just there as a 20-minute-a-night sort of player who, if they need someone to fill in and heat up one night and score points and occasionally, that's what he's there for. But the deal is weird. The fit is weird. The ability for him to impact the growth of guys like Gordon is nonsensical to me. Can you explain it away?
I think you hit it on the head. He's there to be the backup small forward, backup power forward. One of those two positions. I mean, I think you'll see lineups where him and Gordon are on this court together, perhaps where they take Gordon out early in the first quarter and bring him back in to play power forward in the second alongside Ibaka or alongside Biyombo or alongside Vucevic even. He's there to back up that 3-4 position and kind of, I guess, give Aaron Gordon someone to practice against at all times who's kind of similar to him, maybe. The salary itself, it's a 1 year. I mean, the salary is exorbitant for sure. $15 million for Jeff Green is crazy, but it's a 1 year deal. So I'm not going crazy over the salary. Who else were they going to get to fill that role and give them some depth and be a backup guy? And then occasionally, yes, Jeff Green does have a good game occasionally. The Magic were a victim to a 30-point Jeff Green game last year. When he does that, you ride the hot hand. But at the end of the day, if Jeff Green is starting over Aaron Gordon or over Serge Ibaka, something has gone terribly wrong, and the whole thing didn't work anyway. And the Magic are up a creek without a paddle. So I'm not. Everyone's kind of overthought this Jeff Green thing, thinking he's gonna challenge Gordon to start. that I don't think that's the case at all. I think the Magic are very invested in Aaron Gordon. They really believe in him. They're going to give him every opportunity to succeed. And if Jeff Green is able to beat him out in practice for whatever reason, that just means Aaron Gordon wasn't good enough. And now they know they need to move on, and everything failed, and everything's pretty much failed anyway. So you're getting ready to blow it up again anyway. So I'm not overreacting to the Jeff Green signing at all. I think he'll be a decent veteran. You bring him off the bench. You hope you get a hot hand. You're just. I think every game for Frank Vogel is going to be a balancing act of finding out who's got it tonight. Who can I rely on? Who can I finish with? This game to help me win. And if I can't figure that out, I'm going to let the young guys play and figure some things out and let them learn, which I don't think is something Scott Skiles would have done. I think Skiles would play Jeff Green over Aaron Gordon. So if Skiles were still the coach, I'd be a lot more concerned about the Jeff Green hire. But I think Jeff Green is there sort of as insurance, as added depth, and less as pressure on Aaron Gordon or Serge Ibaka or anyone else.
Yeah, I agree with that. So look, he's getting drafted at pick 144 on Yahoo Leagues, which is just ridiculous.
I wouldn't even bother drafting him.
It's ridiculous. He's an outside the top 200 player. There's no way he gets more than 25 minutes a night. It just makes no sense as for him as a player and for the way that the Magic are currently structured, unless something just goes completely terribly and Gordon is out for the season or Serge hurts himself or whatever. There has to be a couple of things go wrong for him to actually find himself into significant minutes. Now, another player who there is a potential for him to maybe take some minutes away from a younger player, and that's DJ Augustin. We saw him last season when he was in Denver. He played a lot of minutes. He played sometimes over Emmanuel Mudiay. He played alongside Emmanuel Mudiay, but he put up some pretty decent performances, and he's been good in his last few stops in Detroit. He would start occasionally over Brandon Jennings or finish games over Brandon Jennings, and then when Jennings went down, he put up big numbers. He came to Oklahoma City and put up some pretty decent numbers in his first season there. In Chicago, he was really good as a backup also. So he's putting some nice numbers. Now, he's signed to a 4-year deal as the backup point guard on this team. Is there a risk that he takes? He could take some of Alfred's minutes away.
I think it's kind of the same deal where if DJ Augustin is starting over Elfrid Payton, something has gone terribly wrong, and the Magic are ready to move on from Elfrid Payton. I think that's the case. I think we know what DJ Augustin is. He's good for a big game every once in a while. He's a pretty consistent, like 10 points per game per night guy if he's playing really, really well. Solid backup point guard. I think that's how the Magic view him. If he's good for a few spot starts, but he's just not a starting point guard in the NBA anymore if he ever was. And so I think the Magic brought him in to be someone who can, again, push Elfrid Payton in practice, but never really challenge him for the starting spot. If Augustin is eating into Payton's minutes, that means Payton's not playing well. And I think that's the formula that you kind of have to go on with this Magic team is those young guys are going to play. The Magic want those young guys to play, but they also want to win. So if they're not playing, it means they're not playing well, and the Magic are ready to move on. The only guy that maybe is not in that category is Mario Hezonja, who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later on too. But, Gordon and Payton are both in their third years. It's their year to set their extension level, before they hit their fourth year and restricted free agency after that. And so the Magic want to see what they have because they've got to make some decisions and figure out the future of their franchise right now.
There's not much else that happened with them in free agency. That's really it, apart from those guys that we mentioned earlier on. Let's talk about a breakout candidate. Who's a guy? It might be someone we've already talked about. Who's a guy that you look at as a breakout candidate on this team?
I think Aaron Gordon has the potential to be a real big breakout candidate. Obviously, he's coming from kind of a mid-tier level, but we saw his scoring jump up, from his career averages after the All-Star break, especially. I think he got a lot of confidence from being in the All-Star game as a nice little ego boost, and the Magic let him play a lot, and he generally played really well. We saw what Aaron Gordon did from the end of his rookie year to summer league last summer, and it was in 2 months he made an incredible leap. He looked like he could take jumpers off the dribble. His control looked a lot more in balance. It looked like he would be kind of he was the best player in summer league when he played 3 games and was averaging 20 some odd points and just looked really, really good. We were all looking at each other like, who is this guy? We didn't see this player during the regular season. He breaks his jaw, loses all that momentum, has to kind of play catch up when he gets into camp. He's been healthy all summer. I've seen some workout video, and it looks like he's really been working on his ball handling, on being able to shoot off the dribble, on making 3-pointers. And so I think there's a real potential that Gordon is kind of out of nowhere, best player on the team for the Magic. I think they certainly hope that that's the case. But either way, I think, like we said, we'll see his statistics go up across the board with more opportunity. And I think that Gordon is going to really be a breakout guy for the Magic this year.
Okay, before I'm working out which way we do this. I might talk these two minor trades that they made, just to quickly touch on them. They traded for CJ Wilcox, which I think that Wilcox is a decent player who's never going to get a shot in Los Angeles. So he's not bad as an addition, as a guy that, third string shooting guard, potentially comes in, hits some threes. He did that a little bit last season for the Clippers, but he's never going to get that playing time. But then they traded for Jody Meeks, a guy that has just undergone his third surgery on a broken foot. There's a chance that he never really plays again. What was that? Why are they getting Jody Meeks?
I think the Magic wanted to add some shooting.
Okay.
That plain and simple. That's what Jody Meeks does. He shoots the basketball. And so all the shooting is coming off the bench. You might notice it's not in the starting lineup, which is strange. But I think the idea was, let's bring in some more. Let's bring in another shooter. Let's have some more shooting on the roster. He's a good veteran. When he's healthy, he's not a terrible defender. I think they made the CJ Wilcox deal after they knew that Jody Meeks was going to miss some time with the surgery. Essentially, they did the Clippers a favor, sending them Devin Marble before his expiration, before his guarantee date. But CJ Wilcox also gives them another shooter. And so I think the idea was the Magic were just kind of fortifying their shooting a little bit more. If they need to do some funky lineups to get more shooting on the floor with the starting lineups or balance out the rotation, they may do it, but I don't know if that'll affect minutes. This is just a really really weird team at the end of the day.
Yeah, it definitely is that. There's no two ways about it. But let's talk about a couple of players who are key to what they can do offensively. One of those is Mario Hezonja. He really showed a fair bit to me down the stretch when he had to start some games when Victor Oladipo was hurt. And when the Oladipo trade was made, I was pretty excited for Hezonja. Maybe they're going to move him into a starting lineup. They'll play him at the 2, they'll play Fournier at the 3, or switch them around, whatever. They play those two guys on the wings. That's obviously not the case at this point because they're playing Gordon at the 3 now. How we look at Hezonja this season? Is he ready to absorb a bigger role? I think that he is. I think that he is basically going to be the first guy off the bench to play behind Fournier and potentially Gordon as well. And I think we'll see some Fournier, Hezonja type lineups. He's a guy that can do quite a bit of stuff. He can handle the ball. He can shoot. He's an okay defender. I think that he's going to take a step forward, but it's not going to be enough to propel him into a 30-minute role or into a top 100 fantasy season. But for Dynasty Leagues, I'm really excited about what he can do in the next 2 seasons. But what are your takes on Hezonja for this season?
I'm really high on Hezonja. I think you're right. They're gonna rely on him to be kind of the 6th man for the team. I think they're gonna actually kind of put him on the ball more a little bit in pick and rolls and let him kind of orchestrate things, which I think is gonna keep him engaged more offensively. I don't think Skiles ever developed any trust in Mario Hezonja. Every time it looked like he was taking some steps forward, Hezonja would reel him back and not let him loose a little bit. I think Vogel's going to let him play a lot more, play through his mistakes a little bit more, and I think that's going to add some confidence for him and kind of get him back to the legend of Mario Hezonja that we all love and want to see on the floor. He played in the Olympics. He looked better. He looked like he understood some more things defensively. He's still got a little ways to go there, but his shooting confidence looks back. And I think in transition, especially, he's really, really effective on the ball. And I think we're going to see Hezonja's role increase. I think they're going to rely on him a lot more. And I think they're just going to let him play a little bit more. And that's going to increase his confidence and let him kind of just be himself more. And I think that was something that was a major failure from Skiles last year. He just never let Hezonja out of his box almost. And I think that was really not really bad for him in his development. Hezonja is not quite ready to start, but I imagine that the Magic kind of foresee either him sliding into the small forward position 2-3 years from now in like a year or two, or at one day eventually replacing Evan Fournier in the same way that I think they expected Aaron Gordon to replace Tobias Harris, and they just deal Harris when that time came. And so I think the Magic have strategized this a little bit, and they're just kind of waiting for Hazonia to take that step up, and I think they'll give him some opportunities off the bench to do that this year.
The other guy is Evan Fournier, who had a real breakout season last year under Scott Skiles. Skiles obviously loved him, and he was a player that Skiles was actually able to bring the best out of. And I've been a huge Fournier fan for a very, very long time. I've always lamented his lack of opportunities until last season, and he took a huge step forward. Now we've banged on about it here, Philip, about this lack of offense in this potential starting lineup, or even on the team in general. Fournier is going to have to carry a really, really large role. He signed a really team-friendly contract. He's motivated. He was ridiculous that France didn't pick him on their Olympic team. I think we all understand that. But he's ready for a really big season, and I wouldn't be shocked if he's a top 50 player this season. His draft position on Yahoo is 127, which is potentially the biggest steal out of the entire draft. If you're getting him that late, you shouldn't even wait till 127. If he's there at 80 or 90, you grab him because someone's going to score. He's going to be the leading scorer on this team, I would think at this point. He's going to be the best three-point shooter on this team. He's going to hit the most threes. He handles the ball. He'll get you some steals. He's a really efficient guy. So a guy who's taking a lot of shots and scoring a lot and still, giving you 46% from the field, it's really tough to get. He is the offensive part of this machine now in Orlando, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's a big part, of it. I agree. I think he's probably going to end up being the leading scorer. He's the most kind of consistent guy on the team. A lot of guys on the Magic last year were very up and down. Fournier was pretty level. Like, he had those big games at the beginning of the year that kind of served notice that he was there. But for the most part, he was able to score his averages almost every night, and you could rely on that every single night. The only thing that I would maybe caution about is Fournier played a lot better in lineups with Oladipo than he did without Oladipo. I'm actually a little bit concerned about him moving back to the 2 in some respects. Yep. Especially without another kind of scoring wing out there. It certainly can still work. I'm not saying that it won't work and that his numbers won't kind of stay where they're at. But if you're expecting like a big jump for like Fournier to get to 20 points per game and keep that efficiency, I want to pump the brakes a little bit on that because statistically he played a lot better at small forward than he did at shooting guard offensively. There were some defensive problems at small forward, but he played a lot better with Oladipo at the shooting guard rather than Fournier at the shooting guard, and so I'm a little wary of that before we get into the season. But I also think that that Fournier is going to be able to kind of keep his consistency level because, like you said, someone on this team's got to score, and he's the best perimeter option the Magic have got.
Yeah, look, that he might not become a 20-point scorer. He might not become a top 50 player. But if you're drafting him at pick 127, there is zero doubt in my mind that he exceeds.
Yeah, 127 seems very, very low for a guy like Fournier.
And look, Serge Ibaka's going at 26, which is way too high for him.
Wow.
Yeah, Gordon's at 94, which is
wow.
a nice bargain. Peyton's at 107. There's a lot of weird stuff happening with this Magic, because I guess people don't understand what's going to happen with this team, and that's fair enough. We don't really know how this is all going to mesh, but to have Fournier being drafted behind Ibaka, Vucevic, Gordon, Peyton, and Biyombo is just something that is insane. And it won't be like that if you're in a competitive league. He's going to go much higher than that, but just be aware that if you see him sliding and he's in the 80s, you need to grab him because it's going to turn out to be tremendous value, I think. Who else? CJ Watson. He's toast, isn't he? He's 32 years old. He can't get healthy. He's the third string point guard. There's not much to really say about him at this point, is there?
There really isn't. I think he'll be fighting for minutes somewhere. It wouldn't surprise me if you see him and DJ Augustin fight for the backup point guard minutes. It wouldn't surprise me to see, especially if Jody Meeks can't go early in the season, CJ Watson and CJ Wilcox fight for the backup shooting guard spot. Certainly Hazonia will be in that mix too because he can play either the 2 or the 3. Watson just had a disappointing season. Even when he was healthy, he wasn't shooting the ball particularly well. And the Magic, will probably give him a fair look and he'll have his chance to compete. But it's not a good outlook for CJ Watson this year.
What's your bold prediction for this season, Philip?
My bold prediction is I do believe the Magic are going to have a top 10 defense in the league by defensive rating. That's where they're putting all their eggs in their basket. I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to come on the podcast. this is just not a good fantasy basketball team. The things that they want to excel at are not the things that are going to be captured necessarily in fantasy basketball. And one of those things is team defensive rating. The Magic are banking on the fact that last year, 10 of the top 11 teams by defensive rating made the playoffs. And essentially that trend continues on, throughout NBA history, or at least for the last decade, that if you're a top 10 defense, you make the playoffs. And the Magic, I'm not saying the Magic are going to make the playoffs. I think that they may be the exception to this rule, but I think the Magic are really banking on moving up from 17th in defensive rating to getting into the top 10. And if they can get into the top 10, that gives them a real shot at making the playoffs. So they may be a team that doesn't have a fantasy stud, but is just hanging around in that playoff conversation a lot longer. And everyone's sitting here like they are today wondering, how the heck is this team doing this?
That's all fair. I think the defense will be really good, but they've got to be able to at least give you an offense that's not the worst in the league in order to actually get someone. Yeah. It is a real chance they could be the worst offense in the league. They probably won't be, but that's not. It's not an outlandish.
They'll be bottom 10, I think, on an offensive rating, and it's been done to be a top 10 defense and make the playoffs with a bottom 10 offense. It's certainly been done, but it's a razor thin margin for error, and I'm very uncomfortable with how close they are to the precipice of disaster here.
Yeah, that's things could go horribly wrong for this team, but hey, it might work out. We don't know. It's an odd mix of players. It's an odd mix of positions and roles. There's a new coach, and they honestly, they cleaned up in the coaching market. It was a great hire for them. They couldn't have done any better, really, than getting Frank Vogel. So that's huge for them, and we'll see how it all works out. But they're going to be a team to watch, definitely, especially early on, Philip, just to see exactly how this all works out, exactly how these new pieces fit, to see how Aaron Gordon's one of the more exciting players in the NBA, to see how he looks in this new role as Paul George. Maybe he takes a big step forward. Let's see how it all works out. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be interesting for you covering the team for Orlando Magic Daily and, of course, on Locked On Magic. Do you want to give a plug to anything that you've got happening at the moment?
We've got some stuff going on. We're taking one last big deep breath before we go into season outlook and preview some stuff. We've obviously got Shaq entering the Hall of Fame on Friday. I wrote a column about why Magic fans should embrace and celebrate Shaq making the Hall of Fame, because he's technically the first Magic player to make the Hall of Fame. Sorry, Patrick Ewing. We're not going to count you as a Magic player for this exercise, but this is really our first Hall of Famer, and he's still kind of a persona non grata in some circles with Magic fans. And I just completed a series looking at the top 25 players in Magic history, did a long podcast with a pal of mine who's also a Magic historian, talking about the best players in Magic history. So one last deep breath before we get into the season.
Definitely check all that stuff out on Orlando Magic Daily, as I mentioned, and of course the Locked On Magic podcast. Leave a review for that podcast and for this one, 5 stars. Really helps the shows out, so I do appreciate that. And I believe that this Locked On Fantasy podcast has made its way into the top 200 on iTunes today, so I'm pretty happy about that. So thank you to everyone.
Congratulations.
I can't see it because it's on the US store, so I can't see that. But David Locke sent me an email today saying that he saw it in the top 200, so I'm pretty happy about that. So thank you to everyone who has listened to the show and helped push it into that stratosphere. It's tremendous to see that. Not that I've actually seen it myself, but I have heard word that it's there. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Philip, thank you for coming on again and chatting with one of the more confusing teams in the NBA.
Yeah, happy to try and bring some clarity, because frankly I'm just as confused as everyone else, and I've had to think about this every day all day for 3 months, so yeah. I'm ready for the season to start.
Yeah, absolutely. You want some clarity. You want to see how it's all working out, because it's all speculation at this point, and it can start to drive you crazy, as I'm sure you're well aware.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to a preseason game, just because that will be some information.
Absolutely. All right, Philip, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. So yeah.